Have you ever been expecting things to turn out one way, only to have them go in a completely different direction? Well, of course you have. We all have. And I was thinking about some of those twists and turns along the path of my life this past week as I was thinking about Jesus and his story. And it was amazing. There were so many different episodes that came to my mind, but one kept coming back. And I thought, that doesn't work. It's such a trivial example. No one will realize how much it meant to you at the time. But it came to my mind again and again, and so I decided this would be the twist, the plot twist in my own life that I would share with you. Years ago, I was training to become a scuba diving instructor. Already it seems trivial, doesn't it? Yeah, hobbies, they're lovely things. I'd made it through all of the training until we get to the last stage when you actually go in, in this case we went out into a lake and you had 4 other students with you. They were other instructor candidates. And before we swam out to the marker buoy and began this simulated training dive, the instructor gave each one of the 5 of us a skill to teach, to test the other students on. And at the same time, the instructor told you that when somebody was going to be teaching another skill, you were supposed to mess it up. And this instructor examiner had it all set up. When I did my skill, somebody else, I knew someone was going to mess up. So we swam out. The task I was supposed to test, I was first up, was the controlled descent. You don't want to do things uncontrolled when diving, or any time in life really. But we get to the marker buoy and I gave the hand signal for my students to begin their controlled descent. And immediately one of them dropped like a rock. This guy had never been diving in fresh water before. He was only used to salt water, and so you need more weight in fresh water. And so he, not knowing how much to put on, just dumped a bunch of lead into his weight pockets. And so as soon as he let the air out of his buoyancy compensator, he was down. Now, I tried to catch him because I knew someone was going to do something, and I turned and swam down after him, and I caught him just before he reached the bottom at about 30 feet. I failed. I was devastated. I had invested time and money and blood and sweat and tears in getting to that point. And now I was going to be getting on the plane and flying home knowing that I had failed. I didn't do what I was supposed to do. And that's not the way it was supposed to work out. I was supposed to be getting on the plane with my chest puffed out, walking up through the line, waiting for someone to ask me if I was a scuba diving instructor, as people apparently did in my mind. Thankfully, no one asked me that question, so I didn't have to say, no, I failed the exam. Life's like that. It's full of twists and turns, and when we think about it, we've all experienced plot twists. We've all experienced the trajectory of what we thought was supposed to happen, turning at a 90-degree angle and going in a completely different direction. Sometimes we might think that that unexpected twist is the end of the story. Unexpected outcomes can be really bad. In fact, it might even feel like it's the end of the line. And there's nothing on heaven or earth that could turn things around and change this bad outcome into something else. No matter what happens, the story isn't over. Not yet. As long as we have breath to breathe and another day before us, the life story is yet ongoing. Everyone who followed Jesus thought things had gone horribly wrong on Good Friday. The hubbub of Jerusalem at Passover hadn't ended. The Passover festival lasts 7 days, and so if what we call Maundy Thursday was their Passover Seder, the festival began that next morning. And then Easter Sunday, we call Easter, would have really been the second of the 4 intermediate days of Passover. So the crowds would have still been in Jerusalem. They might have been a bit calmer, fewer cries of Hosanna, fewer hopes for a military uprising. Most of the crowds would have been found doing things like following the law, which means avoiding work, eating matzah, and retelling the story of the Exodus. Could have also been going to the temple for different services. Jesus' followers would have seen their entire world turn upside down. Last week, the crowds shouted Hosanna, and they thought something was happening. It was so tempting to get sucked into those cries, to the triumphal parade as Jesus came into Jerusalem, waving palm branches all around. It was so alluring, yet our calling was to maintain our focus on the man who rode the donkey. Some of us even reached out our hands to touch the beast and focus on the one who was riding. We said, you're the one who I'm going to follow, no matter where life takes me, no matter what twists and turns lie before me this week, you are the one. I don't think we, just like the disciples, knew where this week would lead. I don't think we know what the future looks like. I don't think we know what's coming next a lot of the time. As the week progressed, various members of Jesus' party interpreted his movements in different ways. On Wednesday, we looked at Judas and how he tried to push Jesus along, believing that with the right motivation, Jesus would rise up and kick the Romans out. And so we had the chance on Spy Wednesday to think about how we, like Judas, so often try to take matters into our own hands and tell Jesus, I've got a great plan for you. Let me do this thing, and then you just stand by to bless it when we're done. God, it's going to be great. Except we face this choice. And one way leads to death in a potter's field, the other to a cross. Which path do we choose? Each one of us has a choice to make so often. And at first, neither path seems like a good idea because we don't realize right away that the cross isn't the end. In fact, the cross is only the beginning. Following Jesus takes us on a completely different path than what we ever asked for or imagined. And we learn what it means when we follow him to love. We learn what it means to be loved. We get to experience acceptance, being drawn into a family of faith that knows no boundaries, that knows no limitations, a family of faith that stand together, encourage one another, and lift each other up, a family that breaks down barriers and meets us where we are. That's Easter. The cross isn't the end, the cross is only the beginning. On Thursday, we were with the disciples and Jesus gathering for their Seder meal and heard that commandment to love one another. We reflected on what that love means, what it really means to be loved and to love others. We shared stories of experiencing love, and we can take those stories and seek opportunities to live them out. We can repeat those stories of love over and over again, and when we do, we live out that commandment. We follow it when we bear witness to God's goodness, grace, and mercy. As we think about that love, we think about what our story of being loved is like. Can we see the way others show love to us? And likewise, can we seek opportunities to love one another? On Friday, we leaned into the darkness, recognizing that every day isn't filled with roses and rainbows. There will be dark times. And when bad things happen, we remember that Sunday's coming. The cross isn't the end. We all experience low points, and they're part of being alive, but they're not the end. Sunday is coming. And so on that first Easter, no one expected the empty tomb. People were milling around Jerusalem, going through their Passover celebration. Anyone who at that point still remembered Jesus or even had heard of him might simply think, well, there's one less itinerant rabbi in the world today. And they were moving on with their lives as an oppressed people. But here we are, gathered together. Here we are with the women in Luke 24. We find Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary, the mother of our Lord, and some other unnamed women. Why they were unnamed, we don't know. Luke isn't here for us to ask. But there was this group of women exhibiting amazing and incredible faithfulness, even though they didn't expect to find Jesus. They were anticipating an empty tomb. They were anticipating a body in a tomb. They weren't anticipating an empty tomb. They came with spices prepared to anoint a body. They showed up expecting to find Jesus in the tomb. Not that day. They knew how things had turned out. They were there on Friday. They or Jesus must be wrong. Even if they thought he had been the Messiah, or maybe still were trying to figure out what it meant to have a Messiah who died, they probably didn't think he was truly the Messiah anymore. Luke doesn't give us a clue as to what they were thinking. It just says they went to the tomb with those spices, expecting to find a body. To their understanding, Friday's events made it clear Jesus wasn't the Messiah, and his story was over. He was dead. The end. The least we can do is prepare his body. Never write the end when God's not finished with the story. Never write the end in your own story while you still have breath. Never give up. Never stop putting one foot in front of the other. Never stop moving. When life takes twists and turns, the times when things are at their worst provide the greatest temptation to give in and believe that it's over. So, sort of like the men in the story. It was all women at the tomb. Even when we find evidence to contradict our expectations, like the women who gathered there at the tomb, we still struggle to acknowledge God's movement. They arrived to find the tombstone rolled away, and when they went in, there was no body, and their first reaction, as would have been ours, was confusion. Luke says they were perplexed, and the word used here implies a confused state. It blew their minds. This wasn't what it was supposed to look like. It should have blown their minds. It should blow our minds. Every single Easter, when we think about God's power over death, it should always surprise us a little bit. The testimony they provide was simply their presence. They went. They continued. When some of the others, notably the male followers of Christ, were hiding, they were there to treat his body. The women were trying to muddle through this ordeal of losing their teacher. And even when there are twists and turns along our path, God calls each one of us to remain faithful. God calls each one of us to continue. We might be tempted to give up and run away, but we keep going, keep following that teacher who rode so humbly into the city on the donkey amidst all the triumph and fanfare and palms waving. We keep our focus on him. We continue to try to live out that command to love one another that he gave in John 13:34 as he gathered for his Seder meal with his followers. We continue to follow the example of these women who showed up at the tomb, and we acknowledge God is not finished yet. Easter reminds us that nothing is impossible. So we join Mary, Joanna, and the other women and we go to the tomb. Like them, we believe in the impossible. The story was finished. They knew it. They were frightened and couldn't figure out what had gone wrong. But instead of stopping there, after hearing and believing, they went to tell the others. And none of the others did anything. I think Luke would have mentioned it if they did. Well, one did. One. Only one said, "Are you kidding me? I've got to see this." According to Luke, Peter ran back. And looking in, he saw that Jesus was gone. The tomb was empty. Something was happening. And then he went home amazed. This story continues today. It continues as we live out that calling, as we live out our faithfulness, as we maintain our focus on Christ amidst all of the distractions of the world. This story continues. God is at work, drawing people together, calling those to sing, "Lift high the cross," calling us to say, "Christ is risen." God's family is one of a model of faith, drawing people together, living out our calling. We follow the man on the donkey, choosing to follow the path to a cross instead of 30 pieces of silver. We live stories of love, and even in the darkest moments, we know that Sunday is coming. Nothing is impossible. Well, I don't want to leave you hanging, so as for my story about learning to be a scuba diving instructor, as it turned out, I went back a month later and took the test again. And the examiner this time, she said, "Why didn't you just do that a month ago?" Because I passed everything. All I could say was, "I don't know." God is still working. God's not finished. God's not finished with me. God's not finished with you. Nothing is impossible. Christ is risen.
I'm frightened to dive into this calling. Frightened to dive, for I fear I'll die on the bottom. I'm frightened to dive, frightened to move, and then I hear my teacher say, "Dive, for you'll rise once again." Rise up, Simon Peter, you whose hopes were gone. The night is over now, it's time to greet the dawn. The one who called you by the sea and gave your name to you has risen from the dead, and he has work for you to do. He has made you alive to a future that's an open doorway. Made you alive to a radically new kind of love. Made you alive to the power of God to turn your life around. Rise up, Simon Peter. Right, lift your voice and sing. Oh, rise up, Peter. Easter gives you wing. Rise up, Mary Magdalene. Oh, you with the sordid past. The one who gave you your life back has conquered death at last. There is a love that made him rise. Love will never go away. Rise up, Mary, now, for this is Easter Day. He has made you alive to a future that's an open doorway. Made you alive to a radically new kind of love. Made you alive to the power of God to turn your life around. Rise up, Mary Magdalene, lift your voice and sing. Oh, rise up, Mary, Easter gives you wings. Rise up, disciples, with wonder and surprise. Pentecost is coming soon, there'll be fire in your eyes. Rise up, you friends of his, get your hopes up off the ground. For soon they'll say of you, you turned the whole world upside down. Oh yeah! Rise up, church, the word is ours. The winter's been too long. We've all but forgotten how to sing the Easter song. Come, have no fear of death, for death has lost its sting. Rise up, church of God, and let the whole world hear you sing. For he has made you alive to a radically new kind of love. Made you alive to the power of God to turn your life around. Rise up, oh church of God, lift your voice and sing. This is Easter morning, Easter gives you wings. Easter gives you wings. Easter gives you wings.
That was beautiful, Ken. I knew he was going to sing that, and I was so looking forward to that.